The most iconic characters in fighting game history were never supposed to exist. Every ninja in Mortal Kombat, from Scorpion to Ermac to Rain, was born from the same cost-cutting hack. One actor, recolored over and over because the arcade hardware literally couldn't store more sprites. Today, I'm breaking down and ranking every single one of them, starting with the absurd origin story that made it all possible, the palette swap legacy. Here's something that sounds made up, but is completely true. The entire Mortal Kombat Ninja roster was built on a single guy, Daniel Pesina. One actor, one motion-captured performance. The developers just changed the color of his outfit and called it a new character. Not because they had some genius creative vision, because the arcade hardware in 1992 couldn't physically store multiple sprite sets. They ran out of memory, and that accident created legends. Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, Ermac, every single one of them exists because Midway had zero budget for originality. But here's where it gets interesting. Players didn't see palette swaps. They saw distinct, mysterious warriors with completely separate identities. The limitation was invisible to the audience, and the mystique it accidentally generated was more powerful than anything a full design team could have planned. Then came the secret characters, and this is where the community lost its collective mind. In the original Mortal Kombat, fighting Reptile required a double flawless victory without blocking, followed by a fatality on a specific stage with a silhouette passing across the moon. Most players never legitimately triggered this in their lives, but everybody had a friend who swore they did. Schoolyard myths about hidden fighters spread for a decade with zero way to verify them. Mortal Kombat 2 tripled down. Smoke, Jade, and Noob Saibot were all buried behind similarly obscure unlock conditions, turning secret character hunting into a competitive sport before the internet existed to confirm or deny anything. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 took it even further. Rain was introduced as a deliberate joke, a character who appeared for a single, split-second flash in the arcade version, purely to bait player rumors. And it worked completely. People went insane trying to unlock a character that wasn't even playable. But the real punchline? Chameleon. Introduced in Mortal Kombat Trilogy, Chameleon randomly morphed between every other male ninja mid-fight, cycling through their movesets in real time. He was the most technically honest character in the entire roster. Every ninja had always been a recolor. Chameleon just made that literally the point. But if the palette swap era gave us the blueprint, the characters that came out of it are what turned Mortal Kombat into a cultural phenomenon. Ermac never existed, and then he did because enough people believed in him. Here's the thing. In the early 90s, players poking around Mortal Kombat's debug menus noticed a strange label in the code readouts. E-Mao. It wasn't a character. It wasn't a hidden boss. It was short for Error Macro, an internal programming tool used to detect and log glitches during development. But players didn't know that. They saw a mysterious name on screen, and they did what arcade kids in the 90s did best. They made up a story. Then Electronic Gaming Monthly poured gasoline on the fire. A reader named Tony Casey sent in a letter claiming he'd fought a secret red ninja called Ermac through some elaborate hidden input. The magazine published it. Zero verification, zero evidence. And it spread through arcades like wildfire, because in an era before you could just Google something, a printed magazine was basically scripture. And the wildest part? The developers saw all of this happening and thought, well, I guess we're making him now. When Ermac finally debuted in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, his design matched the mythology players had already invented: mysterious, red, supremely powerful. The team at Midway essentially reverse-engineered an entire canonical origin to satisfy a demand that was built on a programming label and a magazine hoax. That's not character design. That's fan fiction becoming corporate policy. But his actual lore? Way stranger than anyone expected. Ermac isn't a person. He's thousands of warrior souls, casualties from Outworld's endless conquests, all fused together by Shao Kahn and his shadow priests into a single collective entity. He doesn't say I or me. He says we and us, always. Every line of dialogue, because there is no singular Ermac. There are thousands of voices screaming in unison through one red body. His abilities reflect that composition perfect. Telekinesis, soul energy manipulation, teleportation across entire realms, This isn't a ninja's toolkit. This is a psychic horror wearing ninja colors. And here's where it gets complicated. His origin has been retconned multiple times across different timelines. Was he created by Shao Kahn, by Quan Chi, by some combination of both? There is no single authoritative account of how Ermac came to exist, which is honestly fitting for a character who was never supposed to exist in the first place. He was born from a glitch, raised by a lie, and somehow became one of the most philosophically interesting fighters in the entire franchise. Reptile! Reptile is one of the most resourceful creative decisions in fighting game history, and I mean that literally. Ed Boon wanted a super secret hidden feature after the game hit arcades, but the hardware had other plans. So what started as a deliberate idea became one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise, built almost entirely out of limitations. Here's what actually happened. Back in 1992, the original Mortal Kombat was running on arcade hardware with brutal memory limitations. Boon conceived the idea of a secret character, but had zero room for new assets. So they took Scorpion's yellow palette, combined it with Sub-Zero's blue palette, and got green. That's it. That's the entire creative process. Reptile is a 50-50 blend of two existing characters because the machine literally couldn't handle anything else. Without that memory constraint, Reptile looks completely different. He's not a character born from a design document. He's a character born from a workaround. But here's where it gets legendary. The conditions to actually fight him were insane. You had to be on the pit stage. You had to win a double flawless victory. You couldn't block a single time during the entire fight. Then, you had to perform a fatality. And even then, you had to wait for a silhouette to cross the moon in the background before Reptile would appear to challenge you. This was 1992. There was no internet, no guides, no YouTube tutorials. Players were passing this information through word of mouth like some kind of underground mythology. Reptile wasn't just the first secret character in fighting game history. He was an urban legend that happened to be real. And then something unexpected happened. The developers gave him a backstory. Over the years, that green palette swap evolved into a Saurian, one of the last surviving members of an entire reptilian humanoid race nearly wiped out by genocidal wars. By Mortal Kombat 1 in 2023, he'd been fully fleshed out as Syzoth, complete with a deeply personal story. His signature abilities, the invisibility cloaking and acid spit capable of melting opponents, suddenly made thematic sense for a character who was always meant to feel alien compared to the human ninjas around him. Now, there's a real debate about whether Reptile even qualifies as a ninja. His physiology is non-human. He has no clan affiliation. His motivation isn't honor or revenge. It's survival. He's a ninja by costume and by legacy, not by any traditional definition. And honestly, that makes him more tragic than almost anyone else on this list. Every other ninja on this roster chose their identity or inherited it through blood and tradition. Reptile is wearing someone else's colors because he was never given his own. A genocide survivor dressed in a costume that was originally just a memory-saving trick. The character who started as the least real ninja somehow became the one with the most painfully real story. The rivalry. The most famous rivalry in fighting game history isn't actually personal, it's political. And it started with one man walking away from everything he knew, before Scorpion and Sub-Zero ever existed. Before the tournaments and the hellfire and the spine-ripping fatalities, there were two organizations with fundamentally different ideas about what it means to be a warrior. The Lin Kuei and the Shirai Ryu aren't enemies because of territory or resources or even a single act of violence. They're enemies because a Lin Kuei warrior named Takeda looked around at his own clan and decided he couldn't stomach what he saw. Here's what happened. Takeda was a skilled Lin Kuei operative who grew increasingly disgusted with the clan's methods. Child recruitment, brutal training regimens designed to break recruits before rebuilding them, an ethical rot that had seeped into the organization's foundation. So he left. He crossed the ocean to Japan and built something new, something better. He called it the Shirai Ryu, but Takeda didn't just leave quietly. He chose yellow garb for his new clan, specifically to mock the Lin Kuei's signature blue uniforms. Then, he taught his students modified versions of the Lin Kuei's own techniques, turning their secrets against them. Every Shiryu warrior walking around in yellow was a living insult directed at the organization Takeda had abandoned. The color war that defines Mortal Kombat's entire visual identity started as a deliberate ideological middle finger from a defector. Takeda was eventually poisoned. Someone slipped it into his tea. The historical responsibility for his assassination has never been officially confirmed, but the Lin Kuei are the primary suspects in both the lore's implied logic and the community's consensus. And honestly, who else had the motive? Takeda had humiliated them, stolen their techniques, and built a rival organization that proved their methods weren't the only path to creating elite warriors. Now here's where it gets dark. That ancient organizational grudge, centuries old, built on philosophy and pride, got weaponized by Quan Chi. He destroyed the entire Shiryu clan as payment to the Lin Kuei in exchange for Bihan retrieving Shinnok's amulet. Every man, woman, and child gone. Quan Chi took an institutional disagreement about warrior ethics and turned it into the specific personal massacre that created Scorpion the Spectre. Every get over here you've ever heard is downstream of a philosophical argument about how to train assassins. The cycle doesn't stop there either. In the current Mortal Kombat 1 timeline, Bihan's corruption of the Lin Kuei pushed Scorpion and Smoke to found a new Shiryu, explicitly built to reclaim the honor that the Lin Kuei had abandoned. The rivalry restarts, but this time it's not fueled by hatred. It's fueled by competing visions of what a warrior organization should be, which is exactly how it started with Takeda centuries ago. Fans remain split on whether this partial reconciliation between the clans feels earned or whether it papers over centuries of bloodshed for narrative convenience. But either way, understanding this rivalry changes everything about the individual characters caught in its wake. Smoke. Smoke is one of the only characters in Mortal Kombat history who exists because fans literally demanded it. He showed up in Mortal Kombat 2 as a hidden character, a palette swap of Scorpion drenched in smoke particle effects, and players went absolutely crazy for him. They voted him as the character they most wanted to see become fully playable. And the developers actually listened. Here's the thing. The reward for all that fan love, the narrative immediately punished him for showing up. In Mortal Kombat 3, Smoke was forcibly cyberized by the Lin Kuei, stripped of his body, his autonomy, his identity, converted into a weapon for the same clan that had already corrupted everything around him. His closest companion, Kuai Liang, the man who would become Sub-Zero, protested, fought against it, could not stop it. Imagine watching your best friend get dragged into a machine and knowing you're powerless to do anything about it. That's Smoke's welcome to the roster moment. He's one of 3 cyborg ninjas created during this period, alongside Cyrax and Sector. But here's where it gets interesting. Smoke is the only one who fully reclaimed his human soul and free will. Cyrax partially broke free, but never fully escaped his programming. Sector embraced the machine entirely. Smoke fought his way back to being a person. Yeah, that makes his arc the benchmark against which the other 2 are measured, and both of them fall short. His cybernetic body wasn't just a prison either. It contained advanced nanotechnology granting stealth capabilities, speed enhancement, teleportation, and devastating smoke-based attacks. The Lin Kuei built him into something terrifying. But the most significant detail didn't surface until Mortal Kombat 2011, and it changes everything you think you know about him. Smoke's arcade ending reveals that he may not be entirely human to begin with. He's an Enenra, a demonic creature composed entirely of smoke and vapor. Every struggle, every moment of reclaiming his humanity suddenly hits different when you realize the humanity he was fighting to restore might never have been his true nature at all. His entire identity gets reframed in a single revelation. In the current Mortal Kombat 1 timeline, Smoke co-founds the reformed Shiryu alongside Scorpion following Bihan's betrayal. He doesn't hesitate, doesn't waver, just picks the right side and commits. That's been his pattern across every single version of the story. Loyalty, moral clarity, zero ambiguity, and that's exactly what makes the community frustration around Smoke so persistent. He has a genuinely tragic backstory, a visually distinctive identity, an arc built on resilience that puts most of the roster to shame. Players have been saying for years that Smoke deserves more narrative prominence, more screen time, more of the spotlight that characters with half his depth seem to get handed freely. He keeps surviving circumstances that would define or destroy anyone else. And somehow that never quite translates to the attention he's earned. Here's what you need to understand about Noob Saibot. He's not some random shadow demon they cooked up to fill a roster slot. He's Bi-Han, the original Sub-Zero, the same ice-cold Lin Kuei assassin who fought in the first Mortal Kombat tournament, lost to Scorpion, and died for it. But death wasn't the end. The Netherrealm doesn't let you rest. It took Bi-Han's soul, stripped away everything human, and rebuilt him as a shadow wraith bound to serve the darkest forces in existence. And then they named him something ridiculous. Noob Saibot is literally just Boone and Tobias, spelled backwards. Ed Boon and John Tobias, the co-creators of Mortal Kombat, reversed their own surnames as an inside joke during development, and it stuck. That's it. One of the most menacing characters in fighting game history walks around with a name that's basically a developer Easter egg. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite the two-word name, Noob Saibot is a single character. Saibot isn't a separate entity. It's a dimension of his shadow manipulation abilities, the dark projections and clones he summons during combat. Players have debated for years whether the shadow clone is its own being, but the reality is simpler. Noob Saibot is one wraith with complete mastery over shadow constructs. The clones are extensions of his will, not a second consciousness. He's doing the dark mirror duplicate thing in a way that's entirely his own power, not a partnership. His abilities reflect exactly what the Netherrealm does to the people it consumes. Total mastery of darkness. Invisibility, shadow clone summoning, the ability to construct weapons out of pure dark energy. He's not borrowing power from some external source. He is the darkness. The franchise has plenty of powerful fighters, but nobody else embodies their realm's essence so completely. Noob Saibot doesn't use shadow abilities. He is a shadow ability that happens to have a personality, but the real genius of this character isn't his powers. It's the paradox his existence creates. Scorpion killed Bi-Han because he believed Bi-Han was responsible for the massacre of the Shirai Ryu. That kill was supposed to be justice. Closure. The defining act of vengeance that Scorpion's entire identity was built around. And what did it actually produce? Noob Saibot. An entity substantially more dangerous and purely malevolent than anything the original Bi-Han ever represented. Bi-Han was a cold assassin, sure, but Noob Saibot is something worse. He's evil without restraint, without loyalty, without any of the professional discipline that kept Bi-Han functional. Scorpion's revenge didn't solve a problem. It created a bigger one. That's the kind of irony that separates decent lore from genuinely great storytelling, and his ambitions prove exactly how dangerous he became. Later in the timeline, Noob Saibot was discovered in Shao Kahn's fortress, where he had reprogrammed the cyborg Smoke to serve him and was actively planning to build a cyber demon army, not serving a master, not following orders, building his own apocalyptic force from scratch. The moment he was freed from basic servitude, his plans scaled to world-ending. The fan debate that still surrounds him is whether any trace of Bi-Han's consciousness survives inside that shadow, whether the Netherrealm's transformation was total and irreversible, or whether somewhere deep inside Noob Saibot, the original Sub-Zero is still trapped, watching everything his body does and unable to stop it. Nobody has a definitive answer, and honestly, both possibilities are horrifying. Sub-Zero. Sub-Zero is not a person, it's a title, and the two men who carried it couldn't have ended up more different. The original Sub-Zero was Bi-Han, the elder brother, a ruthless Lin Kuei assassin with cryogenic abilities documented at -500 degrees Fahrenheit. And before you gloss over that number, let me explain why it matters. Absolute zero, the theoretical floor of all thermodynamic temperature, sits at -459.67 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing in the known universe can go below that. It is the point where molecular motion stops entirely. Bi-Han blows past it by 40 degrees. That single detail tells you everything you need to know about what cryomancer powers actually are. They aren't physics. They aren't a technique some ninja learned in a mountain temple. They're something older, something that doesn't obey the rules of our reality. Both Bi-Han and his younger brother, Kuai Liang, inherited these abilities genetically. They're descendants of the Cryomancers, an exiled Edenian race whose ice manipulation is biological, hardwired into their DNA. Sub-Zero was never a fighter who picked up a cool trick. He was born as something that generates impossible cold just by existing. Here's where the story splits. You already know what happened to Bai Han. Scorpion killed him. Quan Chi resurrected him as Noob Saibot, the shadow wraith we covered in the last section. Everything human about him was stripped away and replaced with darkness. That was the older brother's trajectory. Same clan, same bloodline, same training, same impossible ice powers, and he became the Netherrealm's most dangerous weapon. Kuai Liang took the name Sub-Zero after his brother's death. Same starting point, same abilities, same Lin Kuei upbringing that turned Bi-Han into a cold-blooded killer. But Kuai Liang chose differently. He didn't just inherit the title, he inherited the obligation to do something better with it. And he did. After obtaining the Dragon Medallion in Deadly Alliance, Kuai Liang's freezing capabilities surpassed everything his brother had ever demonstrated. He became more powerful than Bi-Han ever was. But the real difference wasn't power, it was purpose. Kuai Liang dismantled the Lin Kuei's legacy of brutality and rebuilt the entire clan around honor. He took an organization synonymous with assassination and corruption and turned it into something worth fighting for. That contrast is the entire point of Sub-Zero as a concept. Two brothers, identical abilities, identical circumstances. One became a monster, the other became a leader. And their eventual confrontations are among the most emotionally devastating fights in the franchise. Picture it, Kuai Liang standing across from something wearing a shadow version of his brother's face, knowing the man who raised those same cryomancer hands alongside him is gone, knowing that whatever Noob Saibot is now would destroy him without a flicker of recognition. Every fight between them is a funeral that never ends. The community has debated for years over which Sub-Zero is the superior character. Bi-Han loyalists point to his ruthless efficiency, his uncompromising menace, the fact that he was terrifying before he ever became a wraith. Kuai Liang fans argue that moral complexity beats raw intimidation every time, that a character who chooses to be better, despite every reason not to be, is fundamentally more compelling than one who simply embraces darkness. But here's the thing, that debate is really about what you value in a character, raw menace or earned redemption, fear or respect. And the fact that two versions of the same title can generate that argument across decades of games is exactly why Sub-Zero sits this high on the list. He carries the longest continuous story in the franchise. Two men, one name, and a legacy that stretches from the very first tournament to whatever comes next. But there's one ninja who's been tangled in that legacy since the beginning, one whose story is literally impossible to tell without Sub-Zero, and whose rivalry defines not just these characters, but the entire franchise. Scorpion, 3 words. That's all it took. Get over here is not just a catchphrase. It's the single most recognized attack in fighting game history. People who have never touched a controller, never selected a character, never even seen a Mortal Kombat title screen, know that line. They know the yellow mask, they know the spear. Scorpion isn't a character you have to explain to people. He's a character people use to explain Mortal Kombat. But here's the thing. Underneath the icon is one of the most efficient tragedies the genre has ever written. Hanzo Hasashi debuted in the original 1992 Mortal Kombat and has appeared in every main series installment except Mortal Kombat 3, making him one of only 3 characters present across every generation of the franchise, alongside Raiden and Sub-Zero in some form. His story setup takes about 4 sentences to tell, and every one of them is devastating. His Shirai Ryu clan was massacred, his family was killed, he was murdered, and then he was dragged back from death. Not as a hero, not as a savior, but as a hell-spawned specter fueled by supernatural vengeance. And the vengeance wasn't even pointed at the right target. Scorpion believed Bi-Han murdered his family. He killed Bi-Han for it. That single act of revenge created Noob Saibot, one of the most dangerous wraiths in the Netherrealm, and the actual architect of the Shirai Ryu massacre, Quan Chi, went unpunished for years. Scorpion spent his entire existence as a weapon aimed at the wrong person, manipulated into serving the Netherrealm's agenda without ever understanding that his rage had been engineered from the start. Every kill, every act of fury, every moment of suffering was built on incomplete information fed to him by the sorcerer who destroyed everything he loved. He was never a free agent. He was ammunition. And despite all of this, despite being the face of Mortal Kombat on every piece of merchandise, in every trailer, in cultural references that stretch far beyond gaming, Scorpion has almost never been the main character of his own franchise. Developers have consistently built new protagonists around him. Liu Kang gets the hero arc, Cage gets the comedy, Raiden gets the cosmic responsibility. Scorpion just exists in the background, the atmospheric constant that holds the entire universe together without ever getting to lead it. The community debate about whether Scorpion or Sub-Zero is more iconic is one that will never fully die. And honestly, Sub-Zero might be the richer character narratively. Two brothers, two moral trajectories, a legacy that spans every timeline. But cultural penetration settles the argument. Sub-Zero is the deeper story. Scorpion is the image. He is what non-players think of when someone says Mortal Kombat. That yellow mask is the franchise's logo more than the dragon ever was. What makes his arc land, though, is the ending. In multiple timelines, Scorpion eventually leads the reformation of the Shirai Ryu, the clan that Takeda built centuries ago as a philosophical protest against Lin Kuei brutality. The clan that was annihilated by Quan Chi's treachery gets rebuilt by the man who suffered the most from that ancient conflict. From massacre to rebuilding, from vengeance to purpose, full circle. So why is he number one on this list? It's not about power level. It's not about combo efficiency. It's not even about narrative depth. Because frankly, several ninjas on this list have more complex stories. Scorpion is number one because he is the consequence of every other ninja on this list. The palette swap era created him. The rivalry with Sub-Zero gave him his motivation. Noob Saibot exists because of his defining act. The Shirai Ryu exists because of what was done to him. Every thread we've pulled in this video runs through Hanzo Hasashi. He is not the best character on this list. He is the one without whom none of the others exist in the way they do. Now I want to hear yours. Drop your own ninja ranking in the comments. Tell me who I ranked wrong, tell me who I missed, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.